Hey Nerdinas! This is the second part of our 4-part series on the internet. Last video we discussed the basics of networking, and this video we are going to be discussing what is called the domain name system, or DNS, and this is essentially how a domain name, like nerdina.org, is transferred to an IP address that the computer can understand and process. So let's get started. Computers are not able to recognize and process domain names. However, networks that the computers reside on are able to recognize IP addresses, and for this reason, each domain name is associated with an IP address, which is a unique numerical value. Now, how exactly is the correct IP address that is associated with the domain name found? You would think that this might just be a basic search process, but with billions of different websites and billions of different IP addresses, it is not that simple to just search and find the correct IP address immediately, as this would not be the most efficient way. Therefore, there are many different servers, each holding information about certain domains. And by searching these individual servers, we can find optimal ways to quickly find the IP address that is associated with any given domain name. The typed website URL, in our case nerdina.org, by the way, URL stands for Unified Resource Locator, is originally registered within your local area network. Once again, the local area network is a set of devices inside of your home or office building, essentially the set of devices within a building. And this website URL within your local area network is registered by a router. A router is simply a device in your home that directs traffic to and from the internet to various computers within a local area network. The router also enables users to connect to the internet. Of course, routers have many different functionalities, and in fact, we will be doing a whole nother video on them very soon. Anyway, continuing, only your service provider knows the location of your computer on the local area network. And for this reason, the website URL must be first sent to your service provider's DNS, which is why the DNS Resolver must be owned by your internet service provider. So after your domain name is sent to the DNS Resolver, which is of course owned by your internet service provider, the DNS Resolver then queries a root server, which holds the locations of all top-level domains. In fact, here's a list of the top-level domains. So here you have all types of domains, and you can even find a couple common ones. For example, .biz is a common domain name. And also there are other common ones such as .org, right here, .net, and so on and so forth. So this here is essentially a comprehensive list of every ending that domain names have. And for each and every one of these domain names endings, there is a separate server which contains the locations of all the websites that are associated with this ending. So now, if I typed in nerdina.org, the root server would query one of the top-level domain servers holding domain names that contain .org. However, there is one important distinction that has to be made. The top-level domain server doesn't contain a list of IP addresses for nerdina.org, but it does know the location of what are called nerdina.org's named servers. A named server essentially contains information about the location of a domain name's various services. For example, Nerdina's name servers are ns1.ipower.com and ns2.ipower.com. Note that ipower.com is simply the website that hosts Nerdinas pages. We will be discussing what that means just a little bit later. So, after the name server is queried and found, the name server may be queried with two possible commands, either 1A or a series of 3As. And depending on which command is sent to the name server, either an IPv4 or IPv6 address will be returned. So here are Nerdinas IPv4 and IPv6 addresses. Now, the DNS will send the IP address to the user's operating system. Okay, so just to review over exactly how the DNS or domain name system works, we have a pictorial representation. So how do we get from a domain name to an IP address? So let's go back to our example of nerdina.org. So that would be our domain name. The domain name is then sent to our DNS Resolver, which is owned by our internet service provider. So say I was sitting at my home and I typed in nerdina.org. First, nerdina.org would be picked up by the device within my home called a router, and the router would then send the domain name nerdina.org to my DNS Resolver. From there, the DNS Resolver would see the ending .org on nerdina.org and send it to the correct top-level domain server. This top-level domain server would contain the locations of nerdina.org's name servers, which, as we remember, were ns1.ipower.com and ns2.ipower.com. These name servers would then contain the location of Nerdina's IP address and would therefore be able to successfully map our domain name, nerdina.org, to our IP address. So that's just a review of the domain name system. Okay, Nerdinas, this concludes the second part of our 4-part series on the internet and how it works. So far, we finished discussing the basics of networking and also the domain name system, or DNS. Stay tuned for next video when I'll be showing you practically how you can see in your command prompt or terminal how exactly the domain name system works and is able to find the correct IP address given any domain name.